dated April 21st, 2020 from the LCC Chair and Vice Chair regarding commission meetings and being held remotely. We all know the rules at this point, so we'll just go straight to the meeting. First thing I would like to just acknowledge that Les Bench, who was a commission member from the early days, passed away between our last meeting and this. Les was always full of enthusiasm. He and I didn't always agree, but his heart was absolutely in the right place and wanted to make a big difference and did in his life. I just want to acknowledge his passing with the council. The first order of business is to review and approve the agenda. Can I get a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any conflicts anyone wants to report on today's agenda? All right. My only comment is really thank you to the legislators that worked hard to get our bill passed in the form that we expected it to be. It's deeply appreciated that the work of this council was recognized. Senator Lang, Senator Dibble, Representative Eklund, and Heinzman, I know you all did a lot to make this happen, and we do collectively appreciate it, and thank you for that. With that, I will turn it over to Executive Director Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see your bright, shiny faces on this rainy day, except up in Carlstead area. Kristen's got the sun shining in on her lucky bug. I have a couple things for you for my report. First of all, to notify you of some conveyance requests. We have two of them, and the paperwork was uploaded so you could take a look at them, but I'll go through them really quickly. First, there was a parcel that was purchased by the Nature Conservancy in their 2017 Minnesota Prairie Recovery Program. It was an acquisition up in Marshall County, and there is a utility easement that's being requested for that. It's temporary. It's the fiber optics has to be installed right along the roadway, but it is on the edge of that property. It affects about 3 acres, but according to TNC, the install and the maintenance of the line will have virtually no impact on the habitat, and the local community considers it of high value. So there's no reimbursement anticipated for the OHF, as the habitat value will be retained throughout this. So a letter was sent to leadership in April, back when we got this, and there has been no dissent or concern from leadership on it yet. That's the first one. The second one is Minnesota Valley Trust has a request regarding their Minnesota laws of 2010 and 2011 Big Rivers, Metro Big Rivers. It's regarding some parcels, a couple of parcels down near Henderson, Minnesota, down in Sibley County, and it's within the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. As you know, that Henderson area gets flooded every year from the Minnesota River, and because of that, the county has to do some. The county highway number 6 gets flooded each year, so they're looking at widening and raising that county highway. Hence, They are looking for permanent and temporary easements for widening and raising County Highway number 6. It'll affect about 2.4 acres, 2.41, I think it is. And there is reimbursement that will be anticipated to the Outdoor Heritage Fund of about $6,809. A letter was sent to leadership last week on that. They have 15 days, 15 business days, I think it is, to get back to us with any objections or concerns. So we're waiting on that. But these are fairly routine and non-controversial conveyances or requests, and in accordance with our operating procedures, and also with barring any objection from the council or legislative leadership, I'll move forward with providing approval for the conveyances. But I wanted to, as normal, provide you the information on them. Also, all that said, we do have the program managers for both of these in the waiting room. So if any of you do have questions, or if you have questions of me, we definitely will entertain those. So I'll just stop and see if there's any questions yet. And I don't see any hands up, so I guess I'll keep moving. If you think of something, we can always back up. Let's see, we're going to be talking about the bill and the recommendations after a bit, but officially we are Chapter 77 in Minnesota law. So yahoo! Thank you again to Senators Lang and Dibble and Representatives Eklund and Heinzman for shepherding that through. We really, really appreciate you, as well as, of course, the chairs, Lily and Rude, for all of their work on it too. We'll be talking about that after a little bit. So when we get to that on item number 6, when we get there, I'll point out some of the things that did happen or didn't happen with regards to the recommendations or the bill. Back in February, on February 16th, we were asked by the House Legacy Committee to provide an overview of OHS or of Lessard-Sams, and especially an overview of our call and our outreach. So I did that, and got some very, very good thank yous from several members on that committee for doing that and for providing them the information. But that brought up the thought that, you know, we really, it probably would be a good idea if I did that for you all as well. So I did put together a PowerPoint, and we did upload it. It's only 6 slides, I think. Another thing that kind of led to my hope of providing you this presentation, this little one, was just some comments that came up or statements that came up during different committees in this year, different legislative committees. And sometimes the comments may not have been centered toward the council. Maybe they were centered toward legislative leadership or something else, but they came up, and I thought you should know about them. One was a comment that said that the council is not inclusive. The makeup of the council is not inclusive, or at least not inclusive as much as they desired. And of course, that is the council. Just for the record, the council doesn't decide who's on the council. That's decided by legislative leadership in the House and the Senate, and then the governor with their appropriations. And again, I'm doing all this for the record too, so that the public knows, and it's an opportunity for us to make sure that there is that the public knows what's going on. Another comment was that the proposal scoring criteria is controlled by a privileged few. There's not always a chance for us to answer or retort when a question or a comment is made. Sometimes they're just hand grenades that are dropped out, and boom, and you got to just kind of deal with it. Well, unfortunately, this, the truth is that the criteria is approved by the council each year, and it's also on the, printed out for the public to see in the call for funding requests. So another comment was that politics plays a part in the council's decisions. And that was probably direct response for me saying the council does a good job of being nonpartisan. And I guess somebody took that as my statement as being not correct. I think it really came primarily due to the council's decision not to fund a land acquisition up by Ely. And the involvement of the council, just so everybody remembers, the involvement of politics, I should say, within that was simply that we were at an in-person meeting, and the county board had sent representatives down from that county to testify against that proposal and to ask that to oppose that proposal. We also received correspondence from the local senator and the local representative supporting the county board and opposing that acquisition. So, if politics plays a part, I think that's probably what brought that comment up. But at any rate, it's something for us to always consider. Do we stay nonpartisan? Are we political? And always err on the former. Or trying to stay in the former. Despite that overview at the committee, I guess there were other thoughts or other comments along the way, and I won't repeat them all, but feeling that we didn't necessarily have enough outreach. So that's really where this PowerPoint slides are going to go. And Amanda, I'm going to try the screen sharing here. Let's see if I can get this done and get. Can you all see that? Or I guess it will be coming through shortly if it's not.
Yes.
All right, great. And now I have to find the little thing that says I'm going to do a slideshow. There we go. Ah. Pardon me, I've got two screens and my mouse keeps going from one to the other. Nuts. All right, well, let me do this. We won't put it into screen mode, we'll just do that. Can you see just the, okay. You can see pardon me for not having it on a full slideshow here. I'll just continue with it. So, first of all, let me give you a kind of a background here. Our call for funding request from a timeline standpoint is pretty cut dried every year. It goes about the same way. And so just to make sure everybody realizes this, in December and January, the council approves the publication for our call for funding requests. In April, we end up posting the call and publishing it. At the end of May, we actually end up closing that call. So it's about a 2-month time frame. And then in June, the staff goes through the applications, reviews them, makes sure everything is correct. And then, of course, at the end of June, those proposal binders or the links to all those proposals are provided to the council to start their review of those. July through August, is when the council really starts reviewing them and goes through and does all the scoring based on those 10 criteria that the council pre-approves. And then in August or September, the hearings are held. And October, November, the council is really looking back. What did you hear from the hearings? Do you want more information? Talking amongst yourselves and looking at the council's information or the council's scorings individually as well as in aggregate on how everything fleshes out and what you think should be funded and where those funding should be going. In December, the council then adopts the finalized funding recommendations, approves language for the bill for those recommendations, and then approves it for staff to forward to leadership in January. And in January, of course, we actually have the language for the bill is then provided to legislative leadership, and January 15th is our final date on that. So the call preparation, posting, and dissemination, there's a bunch of activities that happen every year for that. First of all, as staff, we review our own listserv and our own media database. We do have a media database here. We've had it for a number of years. And that includes news outlets, which are printed, they're printed media, radio, television, online media, cultural media outlets. We also engage in external media posting service because, first of all, they also have all of the traditional media venues in Minnesota and the border of the state for paper, radio, TV, etc. But they also do online media and social media venues. And then, of course, they're in the market, so they're professionals. They get all the updates on this, where our database may have old links, or we may not know about new ones, and so on. So there's a bit of redundancy, but also that redundancy isn't bad by any means. In fact, I think it's helpful in this case for having the call being noticed more than once and by more than one person for sure in every source. But also the media posting service does expand greater than what we had previously. But April 1st, of course, the call is posted and it's put on the web, and it's put on our media lists and the media posting service, as well as social media. We also ask our conservation colleagues to share it in any way they can. And that's Bowser, that's DNR, it's the hook and bullet groups, the environmental groups, anybody that we can think of and that we talk to, we say, would you mind, please? Some necessarily can't, do a big banner on it, but they do tend to share it. And we also ask them if they, like LCCMR or Clean Water, if somebody comes to them that doesn't have where their application doesn't fit or their idea for funding doesn't fit, but it does fit with us, please send them to us. And we try to do the same thing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There's other call related outreach that happens. So upon the call getting out, these are some things that happen. It's not inclusive, not totally inclusive, but this is some of the stuff. First of all, I send an email, a specific email, and a copy of the call to each one of our state senators and state representatives, so Minnesota senators and representatives, and their legislative assistants, to make sure it gets through. Sometimes we get some bounce backs from those, and then we figure out another way to get it to them. So make sure that everybody gets it. We get some replies from that, and some of those are thanks. We actually get some leads from it, and we used to get requests for presentations in some of the districts, but that was pre-COVID. So now we're kind of starting over in trying to gin that up again with regards to presentations in the districts. I'm thinking that next year, after we get this whole new class of legislators coming in, we're probably going to see more of those opportunities coming about, just from an educational standpoint, if nothing else. I also send a specific email and copy of the call to every one of the tribal entities in Minnesota. Last year, I followed that up with calls, personal calls to every one of those entities, to their natural resource people. And I used to do that on a general basis, not to everyone, but to many of them. And this year I went back, I contacted many of them personally with phone call, as well as, of course, follow-ups with emails on select contacts to make sure that, if they had an idea or they're thinking about it. Sometimes it's referring back to last year's talk that we had and some ideas they had that we hadn't seen come through in a proposal. So good conversations all. We also send it out to the same thing, send it out to all the counties, townships, cities, as you see here, the associations of soil water conservation districts and watershed districts, and the League of Minnesota Cities. We also followed up, or I followed up with phone calls or emails to various county land managers and SWCDs, and there's a whole bunch. But with each contact, we make sure that we offer our personal assistance. So if they want presentations, if they want a personal meeting, if they want a Zoom meeting, whatever it might be, we love to sit down and talk to these people about their ideas, help them come up with ideas, etc. There is, before the call comes about, generally, So before April 1st, there's generally some more legislative hearings where we give testimony. It's on the bill normally. Sometimes it's reviews or overviews of OHF, like we did with the House Legacy Committee this year. But what I try to do in each one of those, as much as possible, and it's not always possible because the topics are too confined, or the testimony is too confined, but I try to remind the senators and legislators of the email and the call that they got from us last year, and also remind them it's coming again. It's going to be coming to you about April 1st. So please keep an eye out for that. And then I request them for any of their constituent leads, or if they want presentations, if they want to talk about current proposals, or if they have somebody they want us to talk to. And those conversations, we do get conversations out of that, and they do lead to presentations, or they do lead to other meetings. And that's good. We really appreciate that. Media outreach, we do more than just sending it out. I actually, and I know some of the staff does here when they have occasion, but I make an effort to call certain media people, contacts that I have, and alert them that the call is coming, and alert them that this is an opportunity for proposals. Would they consider at least, if not a story, at least an announcement? And that's been quite successful with many different outlets each year. They appreciate the heads up, and then they're asking for success stories. So that's another good opportunity for us to get more information on. As a full disclosure, when I provide them with contacts for interviews, I do give them your information. And of course, it's online. So sometimes some of you get calls from media, and I thank you anytime that you provide an interview to them or a few words for their articles. But we also provide project managers and, of course, the legislative chairs of the legacy committees if they're willing. CPL gets a lot of exposure this way too. And of course, Kathy Varble or somebody at CPL is usually involved in the presentations or with interviews. We do more in-person research, and that's one that we try to, again, just always keep digging for, because there are so many out there that have questions, and it's getting them to ask their question. So prior to COVID, we did a lot of stuff in person, and there's several things listed there. After COVID, or during COVID, the presentations dried up, but we did a fair amount with Zoom or with phone calls, and then we just used the phone and email to try to get to people as much as possible. Here in 2022, we're beginning to again do the in-person meetings and presentations with the reduction in the COVID guidance. We were able to start some of those things. I was at the Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts in March and did a personal presentation to their group. It was a group of about 70 to 80 people in a room, and we have received at least one presentation or proposal directly from that, and then there are others that we're working on it from our communications with them last year. So we've got at least a couple of proposals coming in through MASWAD or through MOD and their members, and then of course there's just a list of some of the ones that we have met with this year on their proposals, and there's quite a bit more besides that. So overall, just for the record here, there are objectives from the staff, and of course there are our joint goals as well. But our objectives are pretty simple. Basically, from a staff standpoint, we alert the public. First objective is alert the public that there's a funding opportunity here, and then the second is to help potential applicants be successful. So that's helping them with their defining and focusing their ideas, maybe helping them find new ideas. Sometimes we aren't the right place for funding for them, so we try to help them find the right funding source, be it Environmental Trust Fund or CPL or Clean Water or Parks or whoever it might be. We try to spark ideas and that hopefully lead to future proposals, and that happens quite often. There are several that we have this year that were sparks from last year, and we're just really happy whenever that happens. And then sometimes we get groups that don't have the fiscal capacity, but they've got a great idea or they've got a legitimate project. So we try to help them prepare for that fiscal capacity or provide them with a fiscal partner somebody else is willing to handle it for them. Goal-wise, our goals as a council, I think, are two things particularly, and that's to facilitate an open and inclusive funding process for OHF, and to facilitate habitat proposals that the council that can then consider. And so that's the entirety of this this proposal. Now I've got to get back and quit my sharing here. See if I can do that. Amanda, I'm going to need some help.
Mr. Chair, members, one moment. I think.
There we go. Good. Thank you. And so if there's any questions, I'm glad to answer them. I don't think there probably are, but who knows? Otherwise, Mr. Chair, we can go on to the next item because that's the end of my report.
Well, great. Thank you for doing that for us and others. And thanks to the staff for the outreach that you do. I know it's oftentimes people think you aren't doing as much as you're doing. You're actually doing a whole lot. We appreciate the effort.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask or mention one more thing, and that is that we are always interested in improving the process and improving what we're doing. And we try to always keep that in tune here. But if there's ideas or contacts or whatever it might be that any of you have, please let me know. We will gladly incorporate those ideas.
All right. Great. Well, thank you. We'll move on to item 6, which is a review of OHF recommendations. Mark, I'll turn it right back over to you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. Members, I sent out the link to Chapter 77, which is our recommendations in law right now. I sent that out the other day to you. Not that you would have to dig through it, but just so you had it for reference. I'm going to let you know a couple of things that changes that did come about to the recommendations, or just minor things that happened. First of all, if you remember back, we had the recommendations from the council in December, and back in December, or was it? Yeah, it was a December meeting. I believe it was. You all said that there was a motion provided, and the council passed that motion saying, "Hey, just in case there's an increase or a decrease in the February forecast, we would like staff to proportionally make additions or subtractions to the recommendations of the council." So staff, there was another 3.7 million roughly in February forecast. Staff worked with to make those proportional additions, and we worked with the chair and vice chair to make that happen, and also with the authors of the bill. It ended up being about another 2.53% per appropriation. So each of the appropriations, with the exception of CPL, because CPL was already totally funded, each of the appropriations received another approximately $25,000 per million of recommendation that they had already been listed for. So it made up that 3.7 million. There in the bill also, there was a tiny bit of clarifying verbiage in the Audubon appropriation, which was in actually subdivision 5, I think it is 5S, the habitats portion. And it was just to clarify that the Minnesota Prairie Conservation Plan priority areas. Let's see, there was also an extension for ML 2017 Carnelian Creek Conservation Corridor. That extension was added another year. It's a little bit more time for them to complete their stuff. It was actually brought up by Representative Lilly to us to look at that and consider that because of some mitigating circumstances that happened within the ownerships out there for those properties. Whether it will actually come to fruition or not, we'll see. Time will tell. But Chair Hartwell provided a letter and had discussed the matter with the vice chair, and you all received a copy of that letter earlier, notification of that. There was an extension that was requested by DNR to the ML20 fisheries habitat protection on strategic north central lakes. That's the Northern Waters Land Trust. And DNR had requested that extension so that they would have time to finish acquisition on a potlatch parcel that would then will at some point become a state forest land. One of those strategic parcels that DNR would like to acquire. Let's see. Also, the OHF recommendations were put into an omnibus bill, a legacy omnibus. The rest of the omnibus did have clean water, it did have arts and cultural heritage and parks and trails. But for those three areas, it was just policy items and extensions that happened. There were a few unsuccessful amendments during the legislative session too that I can give you some heads up on. There was one amendment to our statute 97A.056. It was subdivision 3, where it was not successful, but it would have required that that an applicant for funding from the Outdoor Heritage Fund to submit a cost-benefit analysis of the proposed project as part of the process. And we did have it had a lot of discussion about whether there's already cost-benefit analysis done by the council on these, and the differences between the benefits, and there's just virtually no way to have one size fits all cost benefit analysis on when you look at a restoration versus an acquisition versus trout stream versus prairie work and so on. But the message comes through that it's always we always can do a better job of making sure that we look at the costs and the benefits of each one of the proposals. There was another amendment that did not make it through. It was also would have been a change to 97A, and it would have, as you remember, outdoor heritage funds right now cannot be used for eminent domain unless the willing seller requests the use of eminent domain, and that's seldom done, but sometimes it's done for their tax advantages. Well, this would have restricted the use of outdoor heritage funds from being used on any eminent domain acquired property unless it was an eminent domain where the property owner requested eminent domain. If that makes sense. It did not pass either. And then there was one more that would have placed term limits on the council of no more than 8 years of service on the council. So at any rate, those are the ones that did not, the amendments that did not make it, but I wanted you to be aware of those. And Mr. Chair, I know that each one of our elected officials who are members of this council, that our 2 senators, our 2 representatives, each have a really unique view of how the bill happens and how their caucus views it. And so I would turn it to them now with your care for their comments.
Great. Yeah, we'd love any comments.
I don't know who wants to go. I don't know if Scott stepped away or not, but
Nope, I was just eating, so I didn't want to do that. You were the chief author, Senator Lang. So
yeah, I guess there's a couple of things that I guess I'd like to address, and I know that Mark was correct when he was talking about throwing a hand grenade and walking away, and that hand grenade is often a lot of criticism, not involved with here's what you should do, but just fix it. And the criticism about politics being involved, well, this is a political board that we all serve and a part of, and I always have thought that we've done a pretty good job. In particular, the Lessard-Sams bill, as it comes to the legislature, is oftentimes well, I shouldn't say oftentimes, very little in comparison to other boards that have similar products to what we do, isn't too much messed with. And I think that that's kind of a testament to the board, one, but also if Senator Dibble and I wanted to squabble about everything, I'm sure we could. I don't know if we'd get as much done. I don't think that politics necessarily need to be involved heavily into this process. You know, we sure have the ability to have a product that is like other boards that I sit on, other boards that I don't sit on, that we pass bills off the floor. But I think we have chosen, at least as far as legislators, to just have the process work the way it should. Now, or do we have political discussion? Sure, of course we do. Have those political discussions ever been, you know, detrimental to the bill? I don't think so. I think we've kind of always, as a board, done a pretty good job of that. As far as scoring criteria goes, you know, that was the other thing I wrote down, that it is arbitrary, and there are things that the board has, I think in the, what have I been on here, 4 years, 3 years? In those years, I've seen some of that criteria, depending on, you know, the environment that we're living in at the time, change just a little bit. And in particular, when it comes to some of the questions that Mark really faced this year, and Senator Dibble was there, when talk about total acreages that we're purchasing, whether it be, you know, SMAs or SNAs or any of those other acronyms that we turn property into. That's a discussion that's coming up, and I've asked Mark and the chair just maybe to start that discussion, and the reason I did that is to stay away from the political fray that may come from it, because that is the way that it so far has started, and I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be a discussion where the board has ultimate say and recognizes that the environment that the board lives in, and that the legislature is facing, in some of the criticisms that both, I don't know, I'm assuming all the other reps on the call have started receiving as well. Probably Representative Eklund a little bit more than you know, Senator Dibble, but some of the outstate concerns with, you know, payment in lieu of taxes, and maybe as a board, how do we start talking about that being or is that constitutionally appropriate to start talking about payment in lieu of taxes for the property that we're acquiring? And, you know, I think I used the phraseology, excuse me, I think I used the phraseology during the committee hearing that when do we transition from restoration to protection? And maybe that's something that we need to start talking about. I don't think it's that time entirely yet, but I think the conversation needs to happen. So other than that, again, you know, a big kudos to the board for having a product that works.
Thank you. Scott, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Senator Lang did a nice job. I'll just say, in terms of, you know, my perception on how things went this year, I actually wasn't aware of those amendments. There must have been House amendments, or I was oblivious, or they happened in a different committee, or my mind was wandering when they were offered. That's a possibility. But I'd say, all in all, when it comes to Lessard-Sams package of recommendations, things were relatively calm this year compared to years past. And, you know, I mean, sometimes there's a lot of sound and fury around this particular council's recommendations, but they usually signifies nothing, because for whatever reason, the stakeholders and interests who are gathered on this table are perceived as politically very, very powerful. And so the recommendations are rarely, I don't think they've ever been changed. And the one time I think there was an addition to a recommendation, it wasn't even a change. It was a line item vetoed by the then governor of the same party of the legislator who made that amendment. And of course, you know, there's the fuss with the House member who was serving when I came on board. But, you know, these things just never actually happen. They never come to pass. It's a completely different story when it comes to clean water funds. And of course, from a different pot of money, LCCMR. And that's because those interests aren't perceived as politically quite as powerful. And so the legislature helps itself to look at those funds as a bit of a cookie jar to reach into. But that being said, I think Senator Lang is absolutely right. There is a place where politics and policy come into play. That's not a bad thing. That's democracy, and that's the way interests influence public decisions. And this board's willingness to listen to those pressures and those ideas, I think, if handled well, is healthy. So thank you.
Rob, do you have anything to add from your standpoint on the House side?
Yeah, I'll start here quickly. I have never understood the such fierce opposition to acreage purchases, especially with it being, from my understanding anyway, mostly willing seller, willing buyer. It's not like anything's being forced to be purchased. With that being said, it's there's a lot of perception, and I say this coming from a county that has, I don't know if I have the percentage right, but I think it's about 63% of tax forfeited land in the county that's on that's already public property. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to working on this Lessard-Sams Council is there is no political majority. I spent 7 years on LCCMR, and it's ugly every year, and getting uglier, and it's in it, and the majority is at the will of either whoever's, as you all know, whoever's holding majorities in the bodies. And so was a DFL majority in the House and a GOP majority in the Senate, that's an automatic room to be set up to be button heads right off the bat, and I think we see it all the way through. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this commission works. Obviously I'm the new member, and I look forward to working with all of you. The Lessard-Sams portion of the bill has never had much trouble in House, except Senator Dibble. All those amendments were House amendments, if I remember right. If I'm Mark, you might correct me on if I'm wrong on that. But and then they come from pretty much the same member every year. So if he's successful, you guys will be seeing him next year over on the Senate side. So maybe you guys will be seeing the amendments rather than the House. So anyway, with that, I'm looking forward to getting on with business here. Thank you. And I have my video off and on. It depends on my internet right now. And just let everybody know I have white flags in my yard that says I'm going to be hooked up to Paul Bunyan soon. So I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for your work to get it done. I do think we do a pretty good job of staying out of the political fray and really trying to just do the work that we've been given the constitutional dedication of the funds that we're entrusted to make recommendations on. So, but thank you, all the legislators that worked on this to get it through. And I think Senator Lang's right. There are things that are worthy of discussion among us that come up. We need to be open to comments and consider what we're doing, because things evolve and all of our knowledge morphs over time in terms of how we can do the best job possible. I do want to just let all the members know that I had a discussion with staff after the roughly 3% increase based on the last forecast was put through. And I instructed staff to go back to all of the grant recipients and tell them that, it was their lucky day, but I didn't think that the council was going to be excited to see any disproportionate increases in staff costs in accomplishment plans when they come through with that extra money, and that we probably were going to be excited to see more money on the ground, not more money in payroll. and support services. So I just want everyone to know I did that. And hopefully you won't criticize me too harshly for it, but go ahead and take shots if you think that I was wrong. Staff can still direct people. Mark, I saw your hand up and then Dudley's. Mark, you're on mute.
Too many buttons to push here, sorry. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to thank our other nonpartisan staff, Janelle Taylor with House Legal and Ben Stanley with Senate Legal, and also Brad Hagemeyer with House Fiscal and Dan Mueller with Senate Fiscal. They are just always wonderful to work with. So I want to thank them on behalf of the staff here as well as the council for their great work. Also, with regards to what Senator Lang said, we will be, at least I'm working with you, Mr. Chair, to let the others know with the possibility of putting this acquisition discussion or a discussion about land acquisitions on our June agenda. And so we can have that, a little more of that conversation then, or else it'll go into July, but probably June. And that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Dudley, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly just make some comments about Mark's earlier comments actually from the public about the diversity piece and lack thereof with the council. And, Mark mentioned that, it's really up to the legislature who gets these positions, but considering how I got here, being a Jamie Becker Finn, a woman of color, got me here in terms of making the recommendation. If she hadn't done that, the likelihood of me sitting here talking to you is extremely slim. So basically what we have is largely white legislators and a largely white council. So the likelihood of a person of color being brought onto this council is extremely slim. I don't think people of color even know that this type of position is even available. I know that it's really not up to the council who gets on here, but when you consider the lack of diversity in legislators and in the council, it does make it difficult for a person of color to sit on this council. And that's just something to take into consideration. A lot of the comments that you spoke of earlier, Mark, resonated with me and certainly make a lot of sense as a person of color. So I just want people to take that into consideration. If you don't spend your daily interacting with people of color, and I'm not accusing anyone on the council of being racist or anything, I'm just saying that likelihood of you recommending a person of color to the council is extremely slim. So just understand that that's an obstacle for people of color. And that's really all I had to say.
Great, well, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to discussion item number 7, which Sandy is going to lead us through.
Okay, before you today for your consideration is a request for an advancement of funds. This is being brought before the council due to session law under subdivision 8 that states that reasonable amounts may be advanced to projects to accommodate cash flow needs, support future management of acquired lands, or match a federal share. The program making the request today is restoring the upper Mississippi River at Lake Pepin, Phase 1. This is a Minnesota Laws of 2019 appropriation with the advice from DNR Contracts Management and has been past practice. They will be requiring quarterly reconciliation reports of all the receipts showing costs spent to date, with the entire amount being reconciled within a year. And just as a reminder, the council has had requests that have come before related to this for a 2015 and 2017 appropriation to Sandhill. The reason for this advancement is working with the Army Corps of Engineers and their need to have all funds in hand prior to moving forward with the project. This would be a $750,000 advance. The team for Lake Pepin project is with us today, and they're happy to answer questions if there are any.
Great. So we basically have to advance the money to get the project done because the Army Corps requires it. Is that the succinct way of putting that, Sandy?
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Can I get a motion to approve the request for the advancement of funds on this project? Is anyone willing to make that motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I think we have to do a roll call vote, Amanda.
Mr. Chair, members, beginning back at number 1 today, Hartwell.
Aye.
Hartwell votes aye. Shara.
Aye.
Shara votes aye. Senator Dibble.
Aye.
Dibble votes aye. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Eklund votes aye. Edmondson.
Aye.
Edmondson votes aye. Eggerling.
Aye.
Eggerling votes aye. Representative Heinzman is absent. Holston.
Aye.
Holston votes aye. Senator Lang.
Aye.
Lang votes aye. Peters.
Yes.
Peters votes aye. Saxhog is absent. Swenson.
Yes.
Swenson votes aye. 10 ayes, 2 absent.
Motion passes. Good luck and get the money working fast is all I can say. We'll move on to item number 8, a presentation of the DNR evaluations of heritage forest lands. Mark, do you want to set this up?
Sure, Mr. Chair. There's been of course, in the past, if you remember, there's a lot of conversations about the conservation lands that were purchased from potlatch, or the potlatch lands that were purchased by the Conservation Fund, and what will happen to those lands. Lands were acquired. You'll hear more about that in this presentation, but Conservation Fund is looking to try to sell those lands or dispose of them so that they are used for conservation moving forward and protecting the forest as a whole, so we have working forests, etc. The DNR has been very much neck deep in this as far as figuring out what's going on, and this is an opportunity thanks to Commissioner Stroman. She had mentioned to the chair, to Chair Hartwell, that hey, maybe we should come in and tell you guys what we're thinking about and where we're going with this. So that's the spur that gave us this opportunity to listen to what they're doing. So Adam, we will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Everybody, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thanks, Mark and Chairman Hartwell and members. I'm Adam Munson-Tiger with the Department of Natural Resources, DNR Forestry. I'm the Regional Forestry Manager in the Northwest region based out of the Bemidji Regional Headquarters. And I should have with me today 2 of my colleagues, Kirsten Larson and Susan Damon. Would you care to introduce yourselves?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirsten Larson. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. I'm a planning director in the Division of Lands and Minerals at the Department of Natural Resources.
And Susan Damon, Assistant Director for Lands in the DNR Division of Lands and Minerals.
Thanks. Thanks again, Mr. Chair, members. I'm happy to have this opportunity to discuss the DNR's Minnesota Heritage Project. So this is our project for working with the Conservation Fund on their heritage project. So not to be confused with the naming convention, we decided to name our project similarly to avoid confusion, and the jury's out as to whether or not that was helpful or not. Kirsten, do you want to, are we looking at the slideshow?
I will get it up right momentarily here.
And we'll just run through this presentation, and we've got time for questions and answers at the end. There we go.
Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, you can advance to the next slide. This is just a project overview, a map that shows the location of these lands, and you probably have seen similar maps, but just shows the red parcels on the map are the locations of the Conservation Fund's purchase of the former potlatch lands from basically Mille Lacs and north, running up through northeast and north central Minnesota. Conservation Fund acquired these 72,000 acres from potlatch in November of 2020, located in 14 counties. And the conservation's goal, as you've heard, is to work with county, state, tribal, and local governments, as well as private organizations over the next decade to determine the best conservation and sustainable management outcomes. And so we are certainly a partner in their goal of achieving that. I'll just rattle off some of the counties that are home to some high concentrations. We are not pursuing or evaluating parcels within tribal boundaries, and the Conservation Fund has been working directly with tribes, Leech Lake and Boys Fort. So they're actively working inside reservation boundaries. And so if our project is not considering or evaluating parcels within reservation boundaries. So that leaves about 40,000 acres for the department to evaluate as part of our project. Cass County comes in as a big one with about 5,000 acres, as does Hubbard County with 10,000 acres, and 3,500 acres in Wadena County. In the northeast, DNR's northeast region, a big concentration in Crow Wing County, 3,400 acres in Itasca, a couple thousand in Cooch County, and a lot of acres up in St. Louis County, some of which are involved in this project and other TCF projects as well. So all in all, that leaves about 40,000 acres for the department to evaluate as part of our work on the Heritage Project. Next slide. So the department has formed a project team to review and rank the parcels. We're doing that using some objective science-based criteria that Kirsten is going to go into some detail in a little bit here. Then we will determine which parcels fill a need in our land portfolio. We'll be relying on local interdisciplinary staff at the field level who are really familiar with these landscapes in local areas to help determine the parcels that are a good fit for the department, really relying on our experts in the field for that part of the project. And And then ultimately, when we land on an acquisition, then to seek support and funding to acquire those parcels. And our interest in this project is really the same as the conservation funds, is to conserve these working forest lands and all the benefits that they provide, to maintain those ecosystem services, the habitat, the water quality, the recreation, the carbon sequestration, and the public health benefits, and forest products, and all those really good things that come out of the forest, and trying to prevent land and habitat fragmentation and land conversion on what have been really working forest lands for many decades. So we really have the same goal as the Conservation Fund, and really appreciative of their work to make this purchase and to make this conservation happen. Next slide. A couple points on DNR's approach to this project is that, as I mentioned, we're not seeking to acquire lands within reservation boundaries. We didn't start off with any predetermined goal for acreage acquisition, nor did we have a floor or a ceiling for a budget. So we're just going into this with a blank slate, really, and evaluating these parcels. We'll be using our strategic land asset goals. Again, these provide really an objective filter that we can use to help prioritize parcels and in an objective way, filter and rank the conservation value of parcels. We recognize that we're not the only organization who can manage lands to meet conservation goals and objectives. And throughout this project, we're collaborating with counties and in conversations with Minnesota tribes. And so it really is a team effort, I think, to help the Conservation Fund be successful ultimately with their project. The last one here is really important, that the Department of Natural Resources wants to take a really comprehensive approach to this project, a long-term look. We want to be efficient with taxpayer dollars. We want to have a transparent project, and we want to make sure that lands that we acquire as part of this project are strategic and serve our strategic mission and vision in the long term. And the way we see being efficient is minimizing transaction costs, utilizing one large appraisal. So taking a holistic project-based approach is how we are managing this project, and how we want to be efficient in that pursuit. Kirsten, you can move on to the next slide. Just a little bit on project communications. We started off, Kirsten's going to go into a little more detail on our project timeline, but starting in about February, we started reaching out with introductory communications. And then as we progress with project updates, so we've been in conversation with tribal governments or contacts from tribal governments and county governments. We're largely working through land commissioners. Most of the counties involved have land commissioners, and so that's been our connection to county boards, and we've reached out to county boards. And so there's certainly good awareness with land commissioners and county boards that the department, that they know about the Conservation Fund's purchase. They know that the department has a project to evaluate parcels and looking at a strategic acquisition in the future, and that really involves working directly with county governments and land commissioners. So we're doing a lot of collaboration there. We want this project. It's important that this project for the department really helps us maintain and strengthen relationships that we have with county governments and Minnesota tribes. And so we're using this project as an opportunity to work on and strengthen those relationships. We've also reached out to some stakeholder organizations, other land acquisition partners that the department often works with. We've been around to a few different stakeholder organizations and some forestry affairs committees and things like that. So that's been our where we're at with project communications. We would be communicating with the public at a later date. So far it's really been process intensive, and we don't have kind of that thing to show and tell about. So we will be getting in touch with the public and making a splash at a later date. Typically with our acquisitions, that's something that we would normally do dedication time or ribbon cutting time. And so we're certainly not at that type of stage. So that's coming, but that's just been on project communications. And then as we go to the next slide here, Kirsten's going to talk about our project, a little more detail about our project overview.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Adam. As Adam mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit today about our project timeline and our strategic land asset management, or SLAM goals, as we call them, which are really the basis that we're using to evaluate the lands that we're reviewing for the project. Right now, we're planning a 4-phase project that, as Adam mentioned, began kind of late 2021, early part of 2022, and will end in very early 2025, we're thinking right now. Part of the reason for that timeline is that, as he said, we're really committed to a comprehensive strategic approach where we're evaluating these proposed parcels in light of acquisition goals paired with local expertise, and we're working kind of all the way along with our county partners and tribal nations to develop an acquisition package that we all support. As you'll see on this slide, Adam kind of walked through the first phase of our project, which is really complete. That was the phase when we stood up our project team internally and started to do some of that outreach that he talked about. We put the 40,000 acres of parcels that we're looking at through an initial screen to determine which might best meet our department-wide acquisition goals, which I'll talk more about in a moment, and did a lot of that, both formal and informal initial outreach to tribal nations, to counties, and some stakeholder organizations to begin those discussions about how we were going to approach this project. During this phase, probably our most formal effort was via a webinar with tribal nations specifically to talk about our project approach and how they would like to participate as we move through these phases. Right now, we're in the midst of what we're calling phase 2, or our county team review. And what's happening right now is that teams of county-based DNR staff are sifting through the parcels. They're using our acquisition goals together with their local expertise to develop an initial kind of recommended parcel list. And as part of this effort, they're also coordinating with counties who indicated an interest in wanting to do that at this early phase, to work through those parcel lists together and talk about who the most appropriate owner might be, depending on our existing ownership, their existing ownership, our goals, their goals, that kind of thing. This is also really helpful in just starting to open up those conversations with counties and develop more of a back and forth approach to how we're going to move through this pretty large scale project. We're thinking that work is going to be done in June. We'll have that initial list of partners list of parcels that's been vetted both internally and with some county-based partners, at which point we're going to move to more what we're calling our statewide team review phase. And what our statewide team is going to do is review those local recommendations in light of some big program and department goals, and then do whatever changes need to be made, and present a preliminary parcel list to our project leadership for their review. And the outcome of that is that we're hoping to have a preliminary kind of approved parcel list that we can take out again to counties and tribal nations to seek feedback and more formalized support from them. Based on that feedback, get the parcel list pretty final and seek our commissioner's office approval of that list. And we're really hoping to have this statewide team phase culminate in a funding request to this body next May 2023. From that point, we'll move into our last phase, which is really our technical or logistical phase, where we do things like completing the survey and appraisal, negotiating the purchase agreement, confirming our funding, getting that title work and review completed, and then go ahead and execute a closing and take ownership, which we're thinking will be done at this point in February 2025. Just as a note, we developed this comprehensive approach so that we could really ground our review in some objective criteria using those SLAM goals I'll talk about in a minute, paired with local knowledge, and so that we're taking into account the perspectives of our county partners and tribal nations all throughout that assessment, as opposed to at the end or even on a piecemeal basis. One of the things we consistently hear from our partners is that they want to know what our end goals are for acquisition. And in this case, our approach will allow us to present to the counties that holistic picture of our plans for acquisition, some of which may be developed in conjunction and collaboration with them, so they really don't have to wonder what our end goal is for this portfolio. We'll try to move through these phases as quickly as we can, and are really committed to moving through this project in that comprehensive, strategic way to maximize the long-term value of the acquisition, get as many efficiencies as we can, and maintain that holistic approach. I'll pause there before I move to acquisition goals. Does anyone have any questions about that piece of the presentation? All right, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about our acquisition goals that I've mentioned a few times now. While each of our acquisition programs have had defined acquisition goals for a long time, DNR first undertook a development of our department-wide acquisition goals in 2014. And since then, DNR has been working through its SLAM, our Strategic Land Asset Management Program. We didn't really think about the acronym before setting it in stone, to define those goals and refine them to meet what we know are evolving conservation, recreation, and economic needs. And in 2020, we undertook kind of the first major revision to those goals, and we updated them to directly address climate change adaptation and mitigation, and water resource protection and restoration, and also to build more objective data-driven measures into our goals so that we better understood how and when we're meeting them. Since that point, we review each of our proposed acquisitions against these goals, and the more goals it meets, the more likely it is to be a good addition to the state's portfolio. Currently, our 6 goals for land acquisition are listed on the slide. You can see them. They're increasing close to home outdoor rec opportunities, protecting significant or rare natural resources, protecting and restoring water resources, mitigating and adapting to climate change, expanding access to existing land holdings, and consolidating land ownership to create larger contiguous blocks of DNR lands so that our lands are more efficient and easier to manage. A lot of times when we share these goals, people say, well, those are great general statements, but how do you know when you're meeting your goal? And that was one of the purposes of this past revision, which was to tie these goal statements to objective criteria. And I'm going to walk just briefly through what those criteria are to give you a sense for them. First, as we look at goal 1, increasing close to home outdoor rec opportunities, what we're trying to do here is target our outdoor rec opportunities to places that are within 30 miles of our major population centers. So right now those places are Duluth, St. Cloud, the Twin Cities, and Rochester, or in places where we have less than 5% public lands and have acquisitions that are in either of those places and that improve access to outdoor rec opportunities. Our second goal, protecting significant or rare natural resources. We've identified about 7 features that we can tie back to GIS layers that we qualify as significant or rare. They're things like designated shallow lakes, identifiable wetlands, native prairie, or those core areas of the Prairie Conservation Plan, S1 or S2 native plant communities, or maybe even MBS sites ranked as having higher outstanding biodiversity significance. Our goal 3, which was a new goal in 2020 to protect and restore water resources, really uses some newly available spatial data to focus on things like critical waterways, wetlands, sensitive shoreline or designated trout streams, or lakes and streams that we have data that demonstrate they're at really high risk of becoming impaired, so that if we were able to protect them, we'd be able to reduce or eliminate that risk, or critical drinking water supplies. Our fourth goal, our second new goal, mitigating and adapting to climate change, really uses parcel data to identify lands that are at high risk of conversion away from a natural use, or through acquisition might be able to convert lands back to a natural use. And it uses existing management plans to identify areas where, if we were able to acquire lands, could create larger contiguous blocks or corridors of land that are really resilient to climate change. Our final 2 goals are really related to access and consolidation. So in goal 5, we're looking to provide new or additional access to existing DNR administered lands, either public access or management access. And in terms of goal 6, we're looking to consolidate land ownership with an eye towards making our land portfolio more efficient to manage, to create those larger contiguous blocks that really have those multiple habitat benefits that come along with them. And we do that by identifying land acquisitions that are within existing statutory or management boundaries. They may share a boundary with existing DNR administered lands, or they may kind of reduce those boundary feet by filling in some of these open spaces here. Before I turn it back to Adam, I just wanted to share that as you look at these goals, you'll probably have in your mind, like, don't most acquisitions meet at least one goal? And that's true. Where we get the most benefit is when we start to see proposed acquisitions that are meeting, 3, 4, or 5 goals. And our target is to have at least 80% of our proposed acquisitions meeting 3 or more SLAM goals. This 40,000 acres that we're looking at, this portfolio, tends to hit several SLAM goals, but it's really particularly valuable because it solidly meets these last 2 goals that I talked about regarding access and consolidation. The lands are largely adjacent to or really near existing state lands, and they present a really unique opportunity to create these larger contiguous blocks of working forest lands, along with all of the benefits that those lands have. So with that, Adam, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks for that. Just in closing here, just a couple examples, just to kind of put it on a map so you can see context of where these parcels are. And so in front of you here, you see in the middle of the screen are parcels outlined in red, and those are potlatch parcels or conservation fund parcels. And then parcels in green there is a chunk of the Badora State Forest. And so this is in Southeast Hubbard County. And what you see here on the map for people that don't understand the different shades of red on color infrared photography, but the maroon color is pine. And so, and then the pinker or redder color are hardwoods. And so you can see in this area here, we've got extensive acreage of really productive pine stands right in the mix of an agricultural setting with center pivot irrigation going on. And so you can just see how these fall in the landscape and the different pressures that exist in these landscapes for, potentially for, in this case, possibly pressure from agricultural conversion and the pressures that puts on a sensitive shallow aquifer, an important aquifer in Minnesota. So that's just an example of what the significance of what protecting these parcels could mean. The next one here in southern Cass County, again, the green parcels are part of our first state forest, actually the Pillsbury State Forest, and you can see the red parcels filling out some of the boundary there on the west side of the forest. And in this case, again, really productive forest lands, and in this case, really important habitat for red-shouldered hawk and Blanding's turtles. A lot of riparian forest interspersed with wetlands. So just really important forest habitat in this case, intermixed with existing state land, and the orangish color there too is county lands. So quite often they're, in one case they might be a really good fit for state, and in other cases they're really a puzzle piece on some county lands. And then the last example here is just an example up in Itasca County in the Big Fork State Forest, and some more of the same. Again, really productive forest land and important habitat, riparian habitat, intermixed with existing county and state lands. So just a few examples so you can kind of see what these look like in real life. And we've got 40,000 acres of really excellent examples of this to pour through. So really just a really amazing opportunity to be able to accomplish some really important conservation. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I guess I have one for you, which is you indicated May of 2023 you intended to put in a proposal in front of us. Are you looking at us as the only funding source for this acquisition?
I think primarily there's possibility of other funding sources. We do plan on self-funding the appraisal portion of this acquisition, and maybe if I could call on Susan to give me a little help on, I'm going to phone a friend on this question.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Chair Hartwell. Yes, our intention is to submit a proposal to LSOHC, and as Adam mentioned, I think we are hoping that we can have OHF as our primary funding source. We are looking at some other potential funding sources, for example, RIM as well.
And just as a follow-up, what happens if you don't get the money from us?
Well, I think we regroup and look for other sources, perhaps bonding, perhaps some ENRTF.
My counsel to you is to not wait till you hear from us, but to be actively pursuing all of those sources, because I very much doubt you're going to get all the money in 1 year from us. You may get dribs and drabs over time. I don't know how much. We have had no discussion, but it would be wise to be looking at multiple sources instead of hoping that we're going to come through for all of it. Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. To piggyback on your question, I was interested in goal number 3, where you're talking about protecting and conserving water resources, and that made me think right away that Clean Water Council or the Clean Water Fund might be an opportunity for some of these properties in specific. And of course, there's other places too.
Thank you. We will take your advice and counsel to heart.
Are there other questions members have? If not, we thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate the update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
So next on our agenda is a discussion of a field trip, if you can imagine such a thing. Truly exciting to think we might actually all get together and spend some time. Mark, do you want to talk about the preparations you've been going through with the field trip? And we have a 2-day meeting scheduled. The current plan is to take the first day for a field trip and then have an in-person meeting the second day for half a day following that in June.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll start out with the second part of that, the meeting. Of course, we have Capitol 123, I think it is. Anyway, it's a room over in the Capitol that'll be available for us, or that we have reserved. Now, we keep our fingers crossed because we don't know if or when there will be a special session. And if that happens, we definitely would be bumped should that be needed for legislative purposes. So we'll kind of stay on top of that as staff, and we'll look at other options that we have. But so we'll try to still consider going forward with an in-person meeting that next day. But I'm going to hand it over to Joe to talk about the tour outline and get your feedback.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. It is nice to be talking about something fun. Field tour. It appears that COVID might be in the rearview mirror, although in my household right now we have active cases of COVID. So if anybody's still looking to get it, come on over. We'll be more than happy to share. So again, the tour would be on June 22nd, and we're looking at going to Southeast Minnesota, and we'd be starting near Lanesboro and ending up near Rushford. We'd be kind of snaking our way through the hills and a whole bunch of different acquisitions and restorations, enhancements down there, and it'd probably take an entire day. So what we're hoping to do is leave early that morning from the Capitol, probably the state office building parking lot. We get a bus, depending on how many council members plan on going, and then we drive all the way down there, do our tour, and then come back late, or fill up as much of the day as we possibly can and make it worth our while, and come back late that day back to the Capitol. And then you'd have your actual in-person meeting the following day and the following morning at the same place. So hopefully that sounds like of interest to you. We'd like to know sooner than later how many people want to go and how many people aren't going to go, just so that we can plan accordingly with transportation. So I don't know if it's possible now to just get a quick head count of who thinks that they can make it and who thinks they can't. I don't know, David, if there's a good way to do that.
All those that think they can come, let us know right now. Raise your hand, or I see Mark and Kristen and Scott and Rob and Jamie and Andrew.
Okay. So a majority, which is good.
Yeah.
So we'll get details out to the members as soon as possible. And then in addition to that, because we're able to do these now, it'd be nice to have a little discussion on other ideas that council members would have, if there's parts of the state that you'd like to see that you've been dying to look at, or if there's types of projects that you want to look at, or if there's, anything like that, we're able to make that happen now that we're able to meet in the field. So if there's any ideas like that that you have, let us know, or even now, if there's a discussion, if there's issues you want to talk about, whether it be shallow lake restorations or, trout streams or whatever, the earlier and sooner we can find out what you guys are interested in looking at, we can contact project managers and get those lined up.
Dudley, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing more prairie restoration habitat. I absolutely love prairie habitat and would love to have a field trip to some of those areas in the western part of the state.
There's no shortage of those projects.
Other thoughts? And we can certainly discuss, assuming we take a bus, we can discuss on the bus future field trip opportunities and thoughts. So I just look forward to seeing you all in person on the 22nd. It should be an interesting trip for us. I've made very clear that we're to take information, we're not to be solicited for future funding on this. This is an understanding of what our what the invested dollars have actually done, not a request for additional funding. In case you were wondering, we have had field trips where it has drifted a little, and it makes sense to make that expectation up front. So any other thoughts or questions? Amanda, did we have any requests for public comment?
Mr. Chair, members, there were no requests or no written public comments submitted.
All right. Is there anything else anybody would like to bring up and discuss? Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to go off of Joe's comments a little bit. When you're thinking about projects, or if you're thinking about projects or things you'd like to see, we have no problem lining up a visit somewhere that's going to be a half day or a few hours. Staff is the only thing we want to make sure is that we get a few people there. It doesn't have to be the whole council. So if there's something in your backyard or a type of project you want to see, like Joe had mentioned, let us know. We just we'll try to figure out some way we can get things done.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is if we're going to see a large request from DNR for the Conservation Fund lands, former potlatch lands, figuring out how we actually better understand that could be an interesting opportunity for us.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, just to mention to you too, there is Marsh Lake, that whole project with the impoundment, the management structure for the water and all the work, all the upland work and everything is done. They're going to have a ribbon cutting for that. They were going to have it a couple of weeks ago, but some things got in the way. I think I can't remember if it was weather or what, but anyway, oh yes, that's right. So that's going to happen a little later in the summer. We'll let you know exactly when and get it out to all the council members. It will be a ribbon cutting ceremony. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, it'd be a very interesting project to take a look at. Also, we just received something from Ducks Unlimited for another ceremony of a wetland restoration, kind of a ribbon cutting or celebration. So we'll get that out to you shortly too.
Great. Dudley, I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that I will definitely be missing the June meeting with prior commitments, doctor's appointments and things. And so I will not be there.
All right. Thanks for letting us know, but we're sorry.
Yeah.
We'll miss you.
Yeah, I was hoping to get to chat. I mean, and basically to interact with people in the council that had nothing to do necessarily with the business, just have person-to-person conversations. I was really looking forward to, but unfortunately June is not going to work. So for me anyway, so enjoy.
Thanks. Any last comments from anyone else? If not, thank you for your time this morning. Look forward to seeing almost all of you in June.
Take care, everybody.